Welcome to Closer to Venus. I'm Johnny Burke, and today's guest is Karina Chapman. She is an author, speaker, conscious connection expert, and dating coach. She also has many experiences with past lives. Today, we'll be talking about what we can learn from exploring who we were and how we chose the life we currently have. Karina, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me, John.
How does a dating coach get interested in exploring past lives, or did the past lives exploration come way before that?
Well, actually, it was through dating that I became interested in past lives. So, which seems a bit bizarre, but yeah, it was through a dating experience that I had that made me explore what past lives were, how they impact us on this life now, and what we can learn from visiting past lives to gain more knowledge about who we are in this life and why we are attracted to certain things, or why we perhaps have certain interests or traits. So, yeah, it's really interesting that it's all connected.
This happened from a dating experience.
It did, yes. I actually met someone online, and when I saw their photo, I just knew that I knew them. Their eyes were familiar to me, but their face wasn't, but it was like I knew the eyes. So I zoomed right in and I'm like, how is it that I can know this person, but I know for sure I've never met them in this lifetime? So that started my curiosity. And once we met in person, it was almost like I was looking at the sun. Like, they seemed to glow so brightly that I almost had to shield my eyes. And I thought, oh, this is a really odd thing. Like, I've never had happen before. What's going on? So that's sort of the connection with this particular person started my journey in looking into what past lives were and what they meant.
Okay. You know what? Now that I think about it, I had an episode a while back where a woman who was a practitioner basically walking people through past life regression, where that's how she met her current boyfriend. Apparently, they discovered that they had past lives together, which I thought was pretty interesting, to say the very least. But then again, it doesn't really shock me, because if you're a dating coach, you're obviously attuned into relationships. So you're probably the type of person that's going to notice that before others because of your experience with relationships. Do you agree?
Absolutely, yes. And as we dated and went along that journey, a couple of months in, I had a waking vision of us in another life. So I thought, oh, maybe that's why you seemed so familiar. And it was really interesting that I knew exactly where I was, what I looked like. I had brown hair and a green dress on, and I was saying goodbye to my partner at the time in that life, which was my current boyfriend. And he was heading off to war, and it was in America in the Civil War times, which, being in Australia, I had no idea what the dates were or anything like that. I'm not a history buff. So after the, sort of time, I looked up online, like, when was the Civil War? Was what he was wearing something that, one of the sides was wearing? Could I find that? Which actually I could, which shocked the heck out of me. I was like, oh, this is actually something that must have happened, because otherwise we wouldn't have had such a strong connection, and I wouldn't have felt that. I'd known him, not his face, but his eyes. So, of course, the eyes are the window to the soul. So, yeah, so that's why it was familiar. So I thought, oh, maybe this is my soulmate then. Not just that we've had past lives together. Maybe, this is going to be a long-term connection.
Mm-hmm. Now, speaking of the Civil War, do you remember whether he was on the Union side or whether he was a Confederate? Did you have any insight into that?
I wasn't sure, because I didn't really know what the sides were, and it wasn't a regular uniform that I would have expected. It was sort of, he had pants on with long boots that were tucked into, the pants were tucked into, he had a white shirt with a crisscross of leather and, a belt sort of thing. So it didn't really look like a specific uniform. So that's why I was really curious. So whichever side it was that wasn't, decked out in a proper uniform. So you would know probably more than me about which that was.
I believe the Yankees, as they call us, because I'm from the Northeast, wore blue uniforms. And the Confederates, I believe it was either gray or like a butterscotch. The reason I bring that up is because I had someone tell me, someone who I interviewed a while back after the tape stopped, after the episode was over, and he actually said, John, I think you and I go way back. I said, what do you mean? I said, I'm thinking Civil War. I said, really? Civil War. Okay. And great. So which side were we on? Oh, we were Confederates. I said, oh my God. I'm in Florida now, but and he described the uniform, and I believe it wasn't the gray, it was the butterscotch.
Yeah, this was butterscotch pants that this guy had on too. So yes, maybe that's the side. So yeah, I just thought, wow, how's this actually happening? I was just, getting out the car on an afternoon, heading for a walk, and suddenly, bang, here's this vision. I knew what his name was, I knew the location, and I knew the date, which I'd never had one thought about the Civil War at all before. So it was a bit of a surprise to me at that time.
So it was a waking vision. It wasn't past life regression, which maybe you explored after that, or how did that work?
Yes. So I ended up being with this person for about 6 years. And then something happened that, was a deal breaker for me. So we split. And then I thought, well, so what was that vision about? Why did I see us in this past life together, in this waking vision? And what did it mean? I thought maybe that meant at the time that this was my soulmate. But then surely a soulmate isn't going to do something to, split us apart so violently. It was, he was cheating. So I thought, well, maybe I was wrong. Well, how do I get the answers? I feel like I've just wasted 6 years with this person and thinking that it was the soulmate, and then this happened, so maybe it wasn't. So how do I find out what the point of me spending this 6 years with this person was? And as I sort of put that out to the universe, I came across this show on TV that I've only seen once and I've never seen again. And it was called Past Life Investigations, where one person would be being regressed in a hypnotherapy session by a hypnotherapist. And then it was being recorded and streamed through to an investigator who was writing down all the points. And then they would investigate what the person said. And it was all sorts of people, different religious beliefs, no beliefs at all. No one really was particularly into past lives. And then the investigator would go investigate to see if they could actually, collaborate and say, yes, this was a town that actually existed. Yes, this type of thing did happen. So I'm like, right, that's what I need to find out then. I need to do a past life regression and figure out what the connection was and why we met in this lifetime. So then that led me to trying to find a regression therapist here that I could go and see in person. So I just did a little search online and came up with this website, and I thought, oh, I really like the sound of this girl. So I gave her a call and I said, look, this is what's happened. I met this guy, had this waking vision, thought that he was my soulmate, but then this happened. Can you take me back to that particular lifetime so I can gain clarity on what this meant for me? And she was like, yep, sure. I thought, perfect, I'm in. So I went along and we went back to that lifetime. So that was my first experience, and I would have been in my early 40s then. And I was a bit skeptical, to be honest, first. I mean, I'd never grown up with knowledge about past lives or anything like that, reincarnation, coming from originally more of a Christian background, and then sort of left that area and just felt more spiritual rather than attached to a religion. But I still had never really thought about what a past life was, what it meant, what impact it might have on me. So I went along to this session, and she got me into the hypnotherapy sort of thing, and I'm nice and relaxed, and she takes me down the stairs and to a hallway where there's all these doors that she says each of these doors take you to a past life. Go to whichever one you're drawn to, and then tell me what the door looked like. And I thought, oh, okay. So I described the door, went through it. And then all I could see was blue. So my conscious mind in the back of my head was going, oh, this hasn't worked. Like, why can I only see blue? This doesn't seem right. But then when she did further investigation, I was about 12 years old, laying in a field looking up at the sky. So that's why I could only see blue first, because I was looking at a blue sky. I thought, oh, fair enough. And so what she did was took me through each significant point of that lifetime. So I didn't see the specific vision that I saw in my waking vision, but I went through that whole entire life. So first I was 12, then I was 18 at a barn dance. And friends of mine there were teasing me because this guy over there, was fancying me, and it was him. And then we jumped to when I was 25. And at 25, I had a 3-year-old girl, twin boys that were 11, and the husband was off at war, which was this guy. And it was a really difficult life. We were always hungry. We were really poor. We were dirty, trying to find enough food for the kids. It was really a difficult life. And then jumped forward again to the next significant point, and I was 40. And I was praying in a church. And the reason I was there was because one of my sons had had a farming accident. So I was praying for, his health and recovery from that. And the interesting thing that I felt was I felt so old, so old. I mean, I'm much older than 40 now, and yet I've never felt this old in this lifetime. So I thought that was a really interesting point. So then we jump ahead to the end of my life, and I was 60, which probably at that time was quite old age. And I was laying in a bed in a high-necked white gown, and I was hardly a bump in the bed. And I thought, oh, I've never felt this skinny in this lifetime either. I was hardly anything of me. And I knew the doctor was in another room with my daughter. And the regressionist asked me, what was wrong with me. And I couldn't really say. It was like consumption. So probably cancer or something like that at the time, that they didn't have the knowledge to actually diagnose. So then from that point, I passed from being in that body into spirit form. And in that lifetime, we'd assumed that the husband had died because he never came back. And of course, there wasn't great records back then either. So that was the logical assumption. However, when I got into the soul form, I could see that he didn't die in the war. And that when the war was over, he found himself on the East Coast, which was really thriving and prosperous, and there was lots of opportunities there. So he chose to stay there and abandon his wife and 3 kids to make a new life for himself. And it wasn't that I was upset with him or anything like that, because, in the soul form, you've got full understanding and you don't feel that way. You just understand what it was. But what I really understood was the reason why we had connected again in this lifetime, which was for me to try and help him to learn to stay and face your responsibilities. And once I sort of found that out, I thought of our relationship, and I thought, every time we had an argument, the first thing he would do was threaten to pack his bags and leave and go back to the other state that he was from. And this was a constant throughout our relationship. So it made me understand that I'd agreed to come back and help him to learn this lesson. And if he could learn this lesson, then maybe we'd still be together. However, when he couldn't learn this lesson, something had to happen to break our connection so that our paths would then, not be joined anymore, and he would go on to whatever it is in his life, and same with mine. So then I really felt at peace with it, because I was really angry that I'd spent all of this time thinking I was with this soulmate, this is the one for me, and then it all got blasted apart. But with the understanding, it really made me go, okay, now I see what it is and why I met him and what the point of it was. And the last thing that I really wasn't expecting when I did a regression session was the feeling of being eternal, because of course we don't feel that in this life. And when I came out of the session, I was like, what am I worried about with this life? It's the blink of an eye. All these things that we think are heavy and, life-threatening or some sort of, massive thing, really, It's nothing. We're worrying about things that really don't matter. And that's not what our focus is. So it really sparked an interest in me after going to that first session of thinking, wow, like I never thought about past lives before. I wonder where else I've been or what else I've learned or what else I can learn from doing it. So then that sort of sparked a journey over many years of going back to discover more things about myself and how that relates to my lifetime now and how I can grow and learn from that to become a better person or to follow the path that I've been wanting to follow in soul form. And of course, we know why we come down here, but we get down here and we've got amnesia and we don't know. So it helps us to find these sort of things out so that we can not so much be a better person, but really follow our soul journey of what we'd intended, of the lessons and the experiences that we were wanting to have when we're down here in soul, in body form.
All right. So you had a waking vision of this person that you met in this life from the Civil War or whatever period it was from. That was confirmed in the first past life regression session. Is that true?
Yes, yes. Although I didn't have that specific point in time that I visited, it was definitely the same person in the same lifetime.
Right. But was that the person that you saw in the Civil War time, or was that a different time?
No, same person. Yeah, absolutely same person. Same name. So it's really interesting that I knew the lifetime name from the vision and also in the actual regression session that I went to.
Right. So the names were the same. I'm curious, what is his name in this life?
Tyson. So nothing like Cal at all.
Right. Okay. All right. Just checking. You also used the phrase or the term soul form. Where did that come from?
I feel that we are souls traveling around in these bodies. So the soul part of us is the eternal side, and the bodies are like a vehicle that we get around day to day in. It's almost like we're down in this lifetime traveling around in a car, for example. And if you go somewhere in a car from point A to point B, and then you don't need the car anymore, you're at your destination. So you get out of the car. So you travel on, but you don't need the car anymore. And that's how I think of us with our bodies. You know, we use them while we need them. And then when we're to the point that we don't need them anymore, we carry on in a different energy form and we leave the body behind because it's no longer needed. So that's my analogy. Or even like, you know, it's winter and you're wearing a big winter coat and then it becomes summer, you don't need the coat anymore. So you take it off and it's not part of you anymore, but you were wearing it, but it's not actually who you are. So our bodies are not who we are. It's our soul that lives and resides within.
Yeah, I've heard that quite a few times. It's good to know that there's confirmation for certain parts or certain parts of the mechanics of how all this works. Now, with the sessions, did you go back for more sessions or I don't know whether you went more than once? How did that work?
Oh, absolutely. Many times, many times. I'm a very curious person and I'm all about connection. So I was really interested to find more information about different past lives, how that maybe impacts me now. Perhaps it explains more about me. So, yeah, so I just went back for the fun of it, really, to see what else I could discover. And to my surprise, it was more than just going back to a human lifetime. There was lots and lots of different experiences that I had on this planet and on others in human form and in other forms. So it really expanded my knowledge on, you know, what you could get out of doing a past life and the knowledge that you could gain about your soul journey. It was so interesting. So that's why I just kept having to go back.
I don't blame you. I would have done the same thing in your position. Now, when you talk about waking visions, I've heard this a few times where it's almost like a flash of a past life. This is something that doesn't happen in any kind of therapeutic setting or in a doctor's office or in the office of a hypnotist. Have you had experiences with dreams where you recognize someone in the dream, but obviously that person is not in your current life?
I have had like a reoccurring dream experience, but it wasn't so much recognizing a person, it was recognizing a point in time. So ever since I was a kid, I would have this vision when dreaming, this strange dream where I was in Europe somewhere, in a country that now doesn't exist, and I was on the top of a turret in the castle, and our castle was being attacked. So my job was to refill the catapults with rocks and to put out the flaming arrows as they were being launched up at us. And unfortunately, our side lost. And I knew that that would be the end for me. And there was people dying all around me that had been hit by the arrows, etc. And so I, in my dream, laid down and basically pretended to be dead. Then when I was doing that, the winners of the war as such came up onto the turret where I was and were using long swords to stick into each person to make sure they were dead. And they got to me, and then I woke up. And I always thought that's not really a normal kind of dream that I would have. And it happened quite often.
No, it
was a
isn't.
little bit, especially as a kid, it was a bit like, oh, that was a bit of a nightmare. What was that about? But I didn't really ever think about it being connected to a past life. However, one time I went to a session and I travelled to this lifetime where I was orphaned as a child at only about 3 years old, and I was a male. And so I lived on the street and I scavenged for food, and I got myself, as I was a little bit older, I was a stable hand, and I would sleep on the straw in the stable and look after horses. And as time went by, I'd worked myself up to being head groomsman at the castle. And I spent most of this lifetime alone or with horses or in nature alone. And then at the age of around 33 was when we got attacked. So as we're going through this lifetime, suddenly I found myself on top of the turret again. And I thought, hang on, I know where I am. Like, I know this. I've seen this before. And it was exactly as my dream. So that's what gave me that understanding that that dream was actually a remnant of a past life that was showing itself through a dream form that I had no idea. So it gave me a lot more understanding. And that lifetime experiencing that also made me understand things about myself now. Like, I love to be in nature by myself. And when I was a kid, I was obsessed with horses. If anyone had a horse, I wanted to be their friend. I was just so obsessed with these horses. So it gave me that understanding of, why nature is important to me and being in nature, and also why I had this affinity with horses. And it also made me realize that possibly from being that young orphan with no one looking after me and me having to find food myself, I find in this lifetime, I really notice whose house has got fruit trees, where there's a source of food. And of course, I've never had to go and take fruit from someone else's house. But, even walking in a path somewhere, oh, there's a pear tree. Oh, there's a raspberry tree. I'll really kind of notice that. And I always thought, why would I notice that? But then it gave me the understanding that if I'd experienced that lifetime, then possibly there's some cell memory there still that makes me notice where a food source is, even though in this lifetime, I don't need to utilize that ability.
Right. 'Cause that's something that's obsolete. About the tower, when you first started to describe that, you mentioned it was a place that doesn't exist anymore. How did you know that?
I can't tell you. I just knew that it had been conquered. So it was something different now, like that we would know now, because as we know in Europe, there was lots of invading here and there, kingdoms would fall, different lines would be made for different countries. So wherever it was somewhere that isn't called that anymore. So, and as I said, I'm not into history at all, so I've got no idea. I'm sure if I really looked it up, I could find something, but I couldn't pinpoint where this actual location was. And of course, there's so many castles over in Europe. There's so many places that it could have been. So in that specific instance, I couldn't place exactly what this particular country would have been called at the time. So, but it was in the time of, Knights of the Round Table type thing, swords, flaming arrows, that type of stuff.
Middle Ages, then.
That's right.
That's what it sounds like. Was it Middle Ages or possibly even before the Middle Ages? Kind of hard to say. So, yeah, very interesting. Now, you had, when we first had a discussion, you mentioned something about soul walk-ins, which I have heard about once before. Is that tied to your past lives experience, or is it something completely separate from that?
Yeah, no, it's definitely tied to a past life experience. And so on a different session, I found myself in soul form. And it was in a time where, people would be wearing, those square-toed, square-ended shoes with the buckles on them. And, women had bonnets on and, petticoats and skirts, that type of thing. So again, I'm not quite sure of the year. However, in this particular area, and it was in Europe again, this particular life that I experienced, there was a lot of doubt around beliefs and things that were happening in that time. So my soul had agreed to be what I know as a walk-in. So there was a woman there that wasn't me, that already had a soul in her, where the soul wanted to leave. And I knew that in this particular area, it needed some help in a certain way. So my soul agreed with her to come down and take over her body. So I was aware that I was in somebody else's body, that I hadn't lived all the way through in that lifetime, but I could access her memories. So that was a really interesting thing. So possibly it would be like someone had a bit of a personality change, but they could still access all the memories. So you would think, oh, they're just a little bit different to what I knew them as, but I don't really know why. And of course, it wouldn't have been explained in those sort of terms. So I was aware that I was there for a specific job to do. And I was walking along the street with a basket with my square-toed shoes and my petticoats, etc., and my bonnet. And the basket was empty. And as I was walking, I was swinging the basket and I was heading to church. And while I was swinging the basket, I was able to manifest bread into that for, the breaking of the bread that we would do in the church. And I was there for about 5 years doing the work that I had agreed to do in that area to help lift the vibration of the other souls there. And then when I had finished my task, I left the body. So on the physical realm, it probably looked like maybe I'd dropped dead of an aneurysm, which of course they wouldn't have known what that was then. But I used that body for the certain length of time that I needed, and then I left it. So that's what a walk-in is, sort of walks into somebody else's body. Not that that person's unwilling, the soul's wanting to leave. So for a specific reason, a soul can walk into somebody else's body and do a specific job that's going to help the people of that community. And then when they're not needed anymore, then they step back from the body and go back into soul form. So, and I'd never thought about that type of thing before, even being a possibility of happening. So that was really interesting to know.
What happens to the soul that's in the resident body when a soul walk-in occurs?
Yeah, they just return home, to the spirit realm, to, back to the other souls that have already, that they've known and lost perhaps in the lifetime that they're in. And, then they decide on what their next journey is, whether they come back down in human form, whether they want to go somewhere else, or maybe they even spend some time in the healing place first, especially if they've had a traumatic life or they're really attached to what happened in the lifetime. There's a healing space that you can go into, which I've experienced a couple of times. And it's just like a pale pink sort of feeling energy space where you know that there's other souls there, but you don't interact. You're just there to have your soul restored, I guess, is what I would call that as. And some don't need to be there for very long, and others need to be there for a lot longer.
So what you're describing sounds a lot like the life between life space, because you also mentioned the soul walk-in, the soul form assignment sounds like it's a soul contract, which is an agreement. If you had an agreement in one life to perform a walk-in, hopefully I said that right, that is something that usually takes place in the in-between space.
Yeah, it's quite possible that our souls did choose that, that's what was going to happen. But I didn't experience that particular thing. I just experienced going in, knowing that the other soul willingly and wanted to leave the body, had had enough of the lifetime, because it was quite a hard lifetime at that point, and that was okay for them to do. And, it was easier for me to come in, do what I needed, because I only needed 5 years. So there was probably no point in me starting off as a child, growing up and all of that. And also I wouldn't have had the awareness, because I knew that I was a drop in or walk in and that I had a job to do. Whereas normally if we're born here, we don't remember the things that, that it was that we've decided that we want to do. Yeah, because if we do, then it would be too easy, wouldn't it?
Right. And you wouldn't learn anything, or we wouldn't learn anything. So just to get some clarity here, you did not experience the life between lives space, whether it was in a session or not, but you had the same knowing that many of those people do. When you explored a certain past life, you knew why you were there in that particular instance. Is that pretty much on point, or did I miss something?
Yeah. I do also, when I go and visit specific lives as a human, do take me all the way through till death and into soul form. And then I do spend some time in the soul form as well, whether it's in the healing space, whether it's looking back at the life and reflecting to find out what the learnings are that I can learn from that experience and bring forward into this life. Or maybe it's even to meet a guide, because we all have guides all the time that help us whether we know it or not. And of course, it helps if we ask for help, but if we're not aware of it, then that's a bit difficult. So there's always people that, souls that are helping us and guiding us through our path to cause different circumstances to help us achieve the learnings that our soul originally set for this particular lifetime. And so you can get wisdom in the in-between as well from experiencing past lives and going into that realm.
So you mentioned the healing space. The people I've interviewed basically told me that the healing space and the between life space are one and the same. Were you able to explore this in the sessions with the hypnotist, or did they not try to basically trigger that experience or make you enter that space?
So I only went into the healing space a couple of times. Mostly it was into, which again is in the in-between. It's like, I guess even in the Bible, they say, there are many rooms to my Father's house. So I feel like, there's the healing room, there's the Akashic records, there's all sorts of different areas, but they're all the same house, as in the same realm that we're in, depending on what our soul needs. So I think that different souls go to different places. And even if you believe in different religions while you're here, then you need to kind of gain that understanding. So if you were Christian, for example, and you expected to see Jesus when you passed, then that would be the first experience you had based on your expectations. If you were atheist, then you wouldn't see Jesus because you didn't have a belief in that. You would sort of pass that sort of thing and go into something else, which might be a beautiful field with rolling hills and incredible flowers that are in colours that we can't describe, and just feel that peace. Or maybe if you were not a nice person, for example, or treated people really badly, then you would probably go to the healing space first, because your soul had been affected by your experiences down on earth. So there's lots of different ways that we can go into all the different rooms of, the Creator's house as such. And nothing's right or wrong or good or bad. It's just, depending on what our soul needs in our journey at that time. And, to help us remember that we are energy, soul form that's from the Creator and part of the Creator. And, once you get to that knowledge and that realization, it's just like that feeling of being welcomed home. I mean, others experience, their grandparents or people that have been close to them that have passed that will greet them. So there's no, this is just the way that it happens and that's it. There's so many different things that can happen depending on our beliefs and what our soul needs at that point in time to be able to reconcile back to the fact that we are an energy form, that we are continuing on, and that, there's no need to worry. The experience that we chose to be in that lifetime, we then understand why we had that life, or why we even had terrible experiences that were difficult to go through. The opportunities to learn different things that we'd actually set for ourselves that we want to learn. And in fact, when I was young, I used to think, I know I'm here for a reason, but what is that? Why isn't there just a big blackboard in the sky saying, Karina, this is what you came to do, ... I would have gone, oh, perfect. That's what I need. But of course, if I knew all of that, then I wouldn't go through the difficult times and learning sessions. And, I feel like Earth is a school of learning. And, you can't do the cheat sheet and have all the answers first. You only really truly learn by going through different experiences and then analysing them after, of what they meant and how you could learn something new from it and how you could grow.
It's interesting how certain things, certain platitudes that we thought were, maybe even cliches, everything happens for a reason. God puts certain people in your path, that after hearing this type of testimony for the past 2.5 years, it actually sounds like those things are true. How many past lives do you think you have? Do you have any idea?
Yes, actually, I do. I asked that question when I was in, I got my regressionist to find that answer out for me. And then when I was in soul form in the in-between, I was able to answer, which was 613. A lot more than I thought. In my waking life, I thought, I feel like I've been here a lot, like I'm an old soul, maybe 150, maybe 200. I never would have thought over 600. But that was the answer. So it must be true. And I've experienced quite a lot of them, but obviously not that many yet.
You're going to have to go back for the next 20 years.
That's right.
So were any of those experience like off Earth and different planets, different galaxies? And
Yes. There was one particular one that I went to.
wow, what was that like?
It was incredible, actually, because it was an experience that we've never had. It was on a different planet where the form that I was in was like, I suppose, like a silvery blue jelly kind of form that I could change form. So I could become a flat puddle, for example, on the ground, or I could become tall and skinny like a tall lamppost and see further. And there was also collective thought. So I could hear in my mind all the others speaking. And in that particular experience, I knew where Earth was, which was over to the left of our planet and however many light years. And at that point, it was known as the blue planet. So it was fully water. There was no actual, physical Earth dirt on there. So it was a long time ago. So I can't tell you what year. And I was wanting to go to a different area of this particular planet that I was on so that I could connect better with the Creator. So I had to go further away from the collective voice. So the further distance that I got, the quieter it got in my mind, which then allowed me to connect better with the Creator without the noise of the other beings that I was similar to at the time. So that was really interesting. And in fact, the therapist said to me, her name's Catherine, she's like, I wish that I'd recorded that. She said, that was amazing. She said, when you said to me that you could turn into like a tall lamppost, she goes, did you feel your fingers moving? And, I did. I sort of felt them, like on the chair kind of going like this a little bit. She goes, I swear your fingers got longer. I'm like, no, really? She goes, I swear, I wish that I had recorded that. She goes, I was so shocked. And I was like, wow, that would have been really interesting. So we certainly can be in different forms, in different planets, and have all sorts of different experiences that, we carry through in our soul records, in the Akashic records, but we're just not actually aware of it in this waking life. And that's why I'm so interested in connection. And I'm a conscious connection expert. So it's consciously connecting with different people for different reasons, for, how you can help them move forward on their path, or how, they maybe can impact you on your path, and, making it a positive thing so that we can lift the vibration of others and the experiences they're having here.
Okay. One more question about your practice. When you are counseling people as a dating coach, do you ever reveal any of these experiences, or is that kept separate from your work life?
It depends on the view of the person. I mean, I work with some people that just think this is all woo woo, so there's no benefit to sharing that. So I might use things like words like reticular activating system, which is a part of your brain that's like an executive assistant that helps you notice things that are relevant to you. So I would use that type of analogy for people more than saying, you're on the right same sort of vibration as the other. If your vibrations aren't matching, then, the connection can fall away. So it depends on who it is that I'm speaking to as to whether I talk about that. And even whether they've had that experience. Like I know one of my clients I've worked with in the past has connected with a guy that she also had a waking vision of him and her in a past life. And so then I would share my experience through that it is possible to have a long-term connection in that area as long as both souls learn whatever it is that they're supposed to be learning from each other, then they can move forward together. But if they don't, then the connection will be broken. So when it's relevant, I will talk about it. But if it's not relevant or it's way out of left field, then I don't talk about that sort of thing because it can be a little bit too much for some people.
I would think so, but do you get the feeling that we're going to be hearing a lot more of this in the future? And I wouldn't say it's exactly in the mainstream at the moment, but do you think that's becoming a little bit more common to hear about that from clients, friends, maybe even family?
Yeah, I do actually. I really do. And in fact, my background is in hairdressing years ago, and about 20 years ago, I connected with this client, and I very, very rarely will change a client to being a friend, very rarely. And this girl, we got on well, and she's like, oh, I know this is a bit weird, but, I really want to ask you out for a coffee. And I thought, that is a bit weird. I don't normally do that. But I just thought, you know what, with this person, yeah, I think I will. And her name was Karen. And so years later, she said to me, I just really wanted to be your friend. She goes, and we went out for a coffee and she thought, oh, this girl's a bit woo-woo and crazy for me. She goes, and really weird, but I just really wanted to be your friend. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. And then I happened to go to a past life where I was in Egypt. And this Karen was actually my sister in that past life. And I'd married a guy. I was not a very nice person in that life. I was all about money, beauty, didn't care about anything else except myself, basically. Married a guy because he was rich, not because I loved him. And at the end of that lifetime, she was arguing with me because she'd fallen in love with my husband and was horrified by how little I felt for him and how I treated him. So we were sort of on this embankment having a big argument. And she was so angry that she pushed me and I fell off the embankment and I got impaled upon these two spikes and died. One went through my chest and the other through my lower back. And so I understood then why she really wanted to be my friend, because from that lifetime, she felt such horror and guilt that, she'd accidentally killed me. So that's why she was really wanting to be my friend, even though I didn't really seem like the actual type of person that she'd perhaps choose as a friend in this life. So then that made perfect sense to me. And interestingly too, I had a birthmark right in the center of my chest where the spike would have come through. And I've often had pain in my lower back, right where the other spike would have gone. So there can be a bit of memory there that comes out in other lives as well.
So you have a birthmark where the spike actually ran through you. That is amazing. I think you have many more stories to tell. So there may be a part 2 to this to explore some more of your 613. That's amazing. 613 past lives. To be continued. Karina, thanks for joining us today. How can our listeners find out more about you online?
Absolutely. It was a pleasure. So you can look me up on my website, which is karinachapman.com. and flick me a message through there if you've got any queries or anything that you want to say or ask me. I'm always happy to respond. And yeah, it's all about conscious connection.
It is indeed. I will put that in the show notes in the transcript as well. You've been listening to Closer to Venus. I'm Johnny Burke. If you enjoyed today's episode, please consider subscribing. You can find more info on closertovenus.com. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.